Hello, wine friends. Welcome to Honest Wine Talk. I'm your host, Herim, and I'll guide you through the world's wine stories. Join us as we explore expert insights and tales straight from the vineyard. Here's to sharing the spirit of wine, one story at a time. Hi, wine friends. Today we are talking to Christopher Taranto, Communications Director at Paso Wine Alliance. Chris recently led a seminar on Paso Robles wines at the California Alive Trade Tasting event in Seoul in February. With his deep knowledge and passion for wine, Chris is here to share some exciting insights with us. Hi Chris, how are you doing today?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm very good. So you're back in California?
I am. I'm happy to be back, although it was such a fun trip to be back there. My first time in Seoul, and it was absolutely amazing to be there. The city and the people, the food. It was an awesome experience.
I'm really glad to hear that. Yes. I know that you had a tour in Osaka, Tokyo, and Seoul. Yeah. So what was the entire experience like introducing Paso Robles wines?
Uh, it was definitely eye-opening for a couple reasons. One was the amount of people in the trade in all three cities who actually were somewhat familiar with Paso, who actually kind of knew of Paso wines, and but also I guess the second thing would be how excited they were, whether they knew the wines or not, how excited they were to learn about a new region.
Right. It,
Yeah.
it did definitely create some excitement among the wine professionals in Seoul. I think we had over 600 guests on that day. So yeah, that
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
great turnout.
And the seminar had 80 seated, and I think every seat was taken. So, and then some. I think there were some people standing in the back. So,
Oh, yeah, that's really amazing. So before we delve into our questions and talk about Paso Robles, could you introduce yourself briefly about your career and what you do in Paso?
sure, yeah. So, I am the director of communications for the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. The Wine Alliance is a nonprofit organization that essentially works to elevate the brand awareness of Paso Robles as a wine region, as an American viticultural area. We do that nationally and now, of course, internationally through a number of programs. What I'm most responsible for, though, is all of the trade and media outreach. So, talking to journalists and influencers and anybody who has an audience, basically, that talks about wine to people interested in wine and food for that matter. But also talking to the trade and talking to sommeliers and wine buyers and educators and the like to help them understand what makes Paso Robles unique as a wine grape growing region is another component of what I do. Yeah, so all of those things. I've been in my position for about 17 years now. So I've really seen the evolution of Paso Robles as a wine region really unfold, and it's been great to witness it and be a part of it as well. To see the wines from our region gain in national recognition, gain in accolades, uh, gain in critical acclaim as well, has been really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been there for 17 years, that you really lived through the history, which is really exciting. So could you tell us a bit about the history and development of Paso Robles as a wine region and
Oh, sure.
what sets it apart from other California wine regions so we can better
Yeah.
understand?
So, you know, California in general, they've been growing wine grapes in this area really since native cultures have been able to cultivate wine grapes or grapes in general. But true history of California kind of begins, I guess you could say, um, as a wine region, as an official wine region, I should say, in the early 80s, when the American viticultural areas were starting to be established, right? There's plenty of history before that, but I guess for purposes of what we're talking about and talking about Paso Robles' history, in through the 60s and 70s, we grew wine grapes, and they kind of came here um, in a way from cultural kind of starts when we had, let's just say, some immigrants from mostly European countries who had wine as part of their culture. And so then they were able to get a hold of plant material and plant it and basically grow wine grapes just for their own purposes, not really a commercial endeavor. But over some time into the 60s and then early 70s, there were some commercially established wineries in our area, but still really small, nothing to the likes of what was happening up in Northern California. But then as we get into the 70s and some commercial plantings into the late 70s and then early 80s, it was recognized that we were a wine grape growing region. I believe Napa and Sonoma got their American Viticultural Area designations in like 81, 82. And so Paso, following suit, received ours in 1983. And at the time, there were about 17 wineries here, about 5,000 vineyard acres during that time. So 83 was kind of that birth, I guess you could say, of the Paso Robles wine region. Now, over the years, it's kind of doubled and tripled in size. And now we're up to about 250 wineries or winery brands and somewhere around 40,000 vineyard acres. So it's definitely grown. In 2007, there was this kind of initiative talk and then an initiative to help define Paso a little bit more, in the sense of like it's such a large region. How do we define the mountain areas from the eastern hillsides and the river areas and all of that? So using science as a standard, we had a group of vintners get together, pool their funds to hire the right climatologists and soil scientists and geologists and the like to help define it better. And so in '07, a petition was submitted to what's called the Trade and Tax Bureau for our federal government here in the United States to say, here are 11 districts within the Paso Robles wine region that should be recognized as their own, sub AVAs. It's not really a sub AVA. That's not a real thing. But an AVA just within the boundaries of the Paso Robles AVA. So those nested AVAs were approved 7 years later in 2014. Prior to that, we also put forth what's called a conjunctive labeling law. Essentially, what this is saying that for wineries to use those nested AVAs, they have to use Paso Robles with that nested AVA, so it's in conjunction with. So that way we don't lose that brand recognition of Paso Robles in that process. So if you're using, say, one of those nested AVAs, like where in the world is that? Well, it's in Paso, and it's always going to be a part of that label, so people will recognize it.
That's a massive growth from 17 wineries to 220, you say 250?
250. Yeah,
That's a
an
massive growth.
approximation.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
When you look at it as far as like dots on the map of where to visit, it's really somewhere around 180. It's just that there are a lot of small brands here. I mean, we're talking 200 case, just a few barrels, brands that, it might be like an assistant winemaker or, somebody, a cellar rat who wants to make their own wine and someday aspire to be a brand. Well, they have to start somewhere. And so there's plenty of small brands to go around.
That's really exciting to see. I mean, that's where all the greatness start. Nothing really
Mhm.
start from a big scale. It always starts from something small. I have a question about that. So are those people who own the wineries, are they locals or people move to Paso Robles to start making wine because they heard this is a great region?
That's a That's a great question. And so hopefully this isn't too long of an answer for you. Um, we have I guess the luck, you could say, of having one of the leading like schools or universities in the state of California that has a wine and program, a wine and viticultural program called Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's a polytechnic school. There's three really in the state. There's Fresno State, which is kind of east of here, and of course is kind of near like the Lodi area for wine grapes and the like. And then there's UC Davis, and they're up north, and well, they're kind of near Napa and Sonoma. And so for the Central Coast where we are, we're lucky we have Cal Poly San Luis Obispo right 20 minutes down the road from here. And so what you get coming out of there are a lot of kids, we'll call them kids, graduates, who want to get in the wine industry and are able to maybe get some of their first jobs in the industry here in the Paso Robles region, or even in Santa Barbara and even San Luis Obispo, which is south of us. But really, really fortunate to have that, and so that kind of I guess you could say, pool of candidates to come and bring fresh new ideas and concepts and ways maybe of doing things and an excitement to learn as well and to think outside the box a little bit. We have that right there at arm's length to be able to glean off of. And so that's kind of, I guess you could say. But then we also have people that have moved to Paso. Maybe they're further along in their careers in some other job, or maybe they're just an aficionado and they have the means to be able to maybe start a brand and find a winemaker or something like that. And so we have that as well. And because you could say, in comparison to maybe some other regions that are or have a little bit more history or maybe command a higher dollar, we're kind of that attainable region that if you have enough, it's not easy. What do they say about making $1 million in the wine industry? You got to start with $5 million.
Right.
Because it's a
Yes.
losing proposition, basically. Uh,
Right.
but we do have that kind of almost attainable, somewhat attainable kind of outlook in Paso, where land prices are, for California standards, fairly affordable, and maybe to be a startup or to create something, to choose this as a passion is one thing, but then to actually pursue it is a whole nother thing, and it can be done here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. Yes, starting a wine business is a huge commitment and dedication, plus capital.
Mhm.
So if the last part is sorted, it could be just much, I mean, never easy, but much easier in some ways. So you do
Yeah,
have educated and quality talent pool that you can get in that school.
definitely.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting to hear. And let's now talk a bit more about the terroir in Paso Robles. So I say
Okay.
Paso Robles, and I notice that you say Paso Robles. So it's both correct,
Sorry.
yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. Why
Yeah,
don't we can address that? So Paso Robles, Paso
yes.
Robles. So El Paso de Robles is really how the name is supposed to be said. It's Spanish for the Pass of the Oaks, or the this oak laden area. because we have a lot of oak trees here. We're part of what's called we'll talk about this a little bit, is the Santa Lucia mountain range. We're kind of that southern end of it, and where it's up between us and the coastline, and just that range itself is home to what's called the coastal live oak, um, or it's an oak tree, but it's an evergreen. It's interesting.
Mm.
And then you have also what's called the valley oak or the white oak, which are these large, beautiful, commanding oak trees that are just that classic look of oak tree all over in the mountains, but then especially as you go east of here. And so long ago, when we got our name, El Paso de Robles, obviously because of California being very, formerly a Mexican state and everything, um, that was the name. But then over time, of course, we kind of make the name our own. And so just like Los Angeles is not pronounced Los Angeles, it's pronounced Los Angeles. It's pronounced Paso Robles because that's how we do it, or just Paso, just like LA is LA, Paso's Paso. So.
Okay, maybe Paso is easier for everyone in the world, but okay, so
Mhm.
let's say then Paso Robles, just to honor the way we pronounce it in the right way. So, right, so let's delve into the terroir of Paso Robles. So how does it differ from other regions in California, and how does it? You talked a little bit about the mountain ranges and the coastal um, proximity to the ocean. Yeah, so could you talk to us about the climate, the soil composition, and the impact on the wines produced?
Sure. Yeah. So first, we'll say Paso Robles is on the Pacific plate, right? So when you look at tectonic plates, Paso's on the Pacific plate, and then pretty much everything east and then mostly north of here, at least north of what would be the San Francisco Bay Area. So North Coast, Sonoma, Napa, uh, Lodi, east of here, and all. They're all on the North American plate. So the Pacific plate is, for all intents and purpose, ancient seabed. Where we reside on that ancient seabed is really in a spot where the most recent uplift of that ancient seabed exists. So these are younger soils in the context of millions and millions of years, but younger soils. And so what we have here is a lot of calcareous type material. So calcium rich. You got to think millions of years of sea creatures, bones and shells and the like, uh, decomposing to become rock or sedimentary rock, rock that has been layered and compressed over time, and then eventually uplifted as the plates moved and crashed into one another over millions of years. And then the sea washed away. And then over time, you've had organics on land that eventually create different soil types. But all of those soil types, oftentimes, that common lineage is coming from what's called the Monterey Formation, or this ancient seabed that is this calcium rich stuff. Um, and also some limestone. There is limestone here as well, like many old world regions. So that's just the same material, that calcareous stuff, but just with more compression and heat and time. Essentially, it becomes limestone. So anyway, how that's different is that North American plate folks are going to have more time because they were exposed longer, more time for organics and the like. But then their bedrock and all would be more on the volcanic side of things. Some of it seabed as well, or some of it kind of marine um, entwined, I guess you could say. But really, when you're talking about, say, like Napa, I mean, a big thing about them is that they have um, volcanic soils, and we don't. I mean, we have volcanic elements that might exist, but that's not like that. That's not our thing. I guess you could say. And so from a soil standpoint, that's what makes us different. You also have, more fertile type soils when you go, say, east of here to some of the other wine regions, or even up towards the mountains. You're going to have different granitic type soils, including over in Napa. Napa's going to have some of those very fertile soils as well, like down in the valley. So, just very different. We don't have that. Our other soil types include clay and some like alluvial elements there's a lot of sand, let's just say. So those are kind of what we're working with here. There's 30 different parent soil series, but a common thread is this calcareous type of material.
Right.
So, and then when we talk about geography, I mentioned that mountain range. So the Santa Lucia mountain range, which is in between us and the Pacific Ocean, is really important in both heating and cooling, I guess you could say. It keeps us warm because it's kind of helping to hold off a lot of that overarching kind of elements and an effect that the Pacific Ocean would have on us, because it's a very cold ocean here. It's not a warm ocean where we are. As you go further south and you get past Santa Barbara area, and when California kind of turns inland in a sense, the coastline kind of makes a diagonal south and in east. That ocean down there tends to be a little bit warmer. It's still the Pacific Ocean. It's just it can hold warmer temps through the summer. We don't ever get warm here. And so with that being said, the cool ocean and how it affects the ambient temperatures here locally tend to, have a very big cooling effect. Well, with that mountain range in between us and the Pacific Ocean, as warm air rises here in Paso, because it can get pretty warm in Paso, it's easy to see anywhere between 95 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit, of course, during the growing season, during our summer. That hot air naturally will rise, and it creates a vacuum effect that pulls in some of that cool air from the Pacific Ocean. But now if that mountain range were there, we wouldn't get warm like we do. We'd probably be really cool, right? But that heat really is elemental into our growing region, and having vines actually get to maturity and get their grapes through veraison and ripened by harvest time. So back to hot air rising, the Santa Lucia range and where and how it sits between us and Paso, or us and the Pacific Ocean, is almost like perfect. It's kind of like this almost Goldilocks effect, because as that hot air rises and mixes with the cool, moist air of the Pacific Ocean, it creates a fog bank way out to sea. And then as that vacuum effect pulls cool air from over near the ocean, well, only so much can get through, but it's just the right amount that gets through that helps, that almost acts like an air conditioner for us. So where we might be, let's just say upwards of 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, it'll be 50 degrees at night. There's a 50-degree in Fahrenheit kind of temperature change that can happen. And that cooling effect is what allows our grapes to, for one thing, not kind of cook overnight. So that helps to preserve acidity. Also, that cooling effect helps the skins of the grapes to kind of toughen up a little bit, right? And so that leads to tannin development, natural like skin tannin development in our grapes. And so all those factors combined, I mean, we've got great ripeness from the heat, but then we cool off so we can preserve our acid. Acid also comes very naturally to many of our grapes because we have these high pH soils that are very calcium rich. And that calcium actually helps to hold off the uptake of potassium in out of the ground and into the wine grapes. And potassium is a kind of like a natural degrader of acid in wine grapes. And so again, that calcium rich calcareous material creates this great natural acidity. The cooling effect overnight helps to preserve the natural acidity. And then you've got great skin tannins and, great fruit. And so that's kind of what creates and what makes us special. We have a mountain range to the east of us as well. And that mountain range helps to keep a lot of the heat of the inland valley of California that can get quite warm, helps to keep that there. And so it's like these two mountain ranges, that frame Paso. But in between is not a valley. In between is not this like, it's not just a mountain and a mountain, but it's kind of a range that foothills down. And then in between are, different little river valleys and different high benches from, past water events and lots of elevation changes. And so there's lots of different aspects and lots of different really dynamic kind of topography that exists in between those ranges. And that's why we have 11 districts, it's because it is so dynamic. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this all explains all the wines that we tasted at the California Live Wine Tasting event, that the
Yeah.
flavors were really big, robust, but at the same time they kept a lovely acidity that you want to
Mhm.
drink more of. It's very moreish as well. So yeah, that's very interesting. And I think, as you're explaining that it has really variety of different style of soils and the ranges.
Mhm.
I'm sure that translates to the variety of grapes grown there. As far as I understand, that you have about 65 grapes grown in Paso Robles. So
Yeah.
now, could you walk us through the diversity of grape varietals in Paso
Sure.
Robles? And what's the most prominent grapes grown in the region and the distinct
Mhm.
characteristics they bring to the wines?
Yeah. So the most prominent grape is Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's quite simple because that's the most prominent grape pretty much in the world, right? Or
Right.
I
Yes.
think maybe not. It
No,
might
yes,
not
yes.
be actually, but at least it is what so many people, especially a lot of Americans, like to drink. Cabernet Sauvignon. Cab is king, and so and back when it was planted originally, that was really where viticulturally we were at a time. We have a lot of brands that specialize in Cabernet Sauvignon and create really, really magnificent versions of Cab in Paso, from the mountains to the west to kind of our kind of rolling hills and savanna to the east. It's grown in all of our AVAs. And it wouldn't do it justice to try to say like Cab is best from one or a few of those AVAs. And so many of the producers in our region tend to make blends or cuvées of Cab from a lot of the different regions. And some are very specific. And I think what you will find is like you typically have a little bit more of that natural acidity and that raciness comes from a lot of the calcareous soils, which mostly exist over in the western hills of Paso versus a lot of the clay soils and maybe some degraded calcium or calcareous material as you go east. Um, and so you have some differences, let's just say in Cab, where you'll find the leaner versions, the big, powerful, fruit forward versions, but that are lean over towards the west. And then as you see some Cabs grown over in the eastern areas, those might have some richness and color and vibrance in on the nose. It can be really bigger and rounder. Definitely present a little bit bolder. And so that's kind of like if you wanted to give it two, you've got two personalities
Mm.
for Cab. Other varieties that are grown here, I mean, of course, Syrah is major, Zinfandel, a lot of that. The Cab. or I'm sorry, the Bordeaux varieties also go hand in hand. When you've got Cab, you're going to see a lot of Merlot and Cab Franc, um, Malbec and the like. And so we still have a lot of those varieties. But I think what's exciting these days um, has been some of the more unusual, maybe even Rhone varieties that are grown that are gaining some traction. Mourvedre, Grenache, Counois, Cinsault, or the white varieties, even Marsanne, Roussanne, of course, Viognier, Grenache Blanc, Picpoul Blanc. You're seeing a lot of those as well, and getting a lot of critical recognition. Seems like the Rhone and the Rhone style blends from our region somehow kind of tapped that interest from a lot of critics. Um, and then they circle back and they're like, oh, but you have Cab too. Wow, cool. Okay, great. And these are great cabs. So we're able to kind of stand out in that way with this diversity because we're not just a Cab region, or we're not just a Rhone region, or not just a Zinfandel. You know what I mean? We take that word just out and we say we are a lot of really great things that we can do here because we have such a great growing environment. And so
Mm.
now we're seeing a lot of Italian and Spanish varieties starting to gain in some attention from just about anybody and everybody who appreciates fine wines, to the point that they're getting even acclaim outside of our area. Um, um, I was going to point out, I think one of the brands that you tasted, Giornata, I believe, they
Mhm.
had a Nebbiolo featured in Italy at this Nebbiolo consortium. And so that was
Amazing.
kind of neat, that we're starting to see that happen here and there, and that's pretty special to see things like that. Anyway, not to point out just one brand, but yeah,
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
there's
that's a
a lot of
testament to the quality across the entire
yeah.
region.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that diversity that we celebrate here, the diversity of varieties and varietals, I mean, it's real. There's so much here that can be attained by growing different things and experimentation, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting to see that it was very interesting to see how many different types of grapes were grown and how excellent all of them can be individually. Um,
Mhm.
but as I have a question about this one, but isn't it a bit challenging because people like to associate one region with one thing? Like for example, Margaret River, Chardonnay, and Cabernet Sauvignon, or
Mhm.
Barossa Valley, Shiraz, or something like that. So people have this clear idea of what to expect from that region. Not to say that they don't make anything else, but people like to have that kind of association. So do you feel that there are some challenges in getting the message across that we can make all of these great?
I think so, because but it's a interesting, tough kind of question because for the entire time that I've been in Paso, that has definitely been a topic of conversation that people say like, well, but you have to be one thing. You can't, you have to focus. But who says? Is it because the wine world operates on that paradigm that you have to be one thing? We don't really think we have to be one thing or one style. Where we're located in the state and the Central Coast, we're kind of smack dab right in between LA to the south and San Francisco to the north. And so that distance doesn't make it convenient, I guess you could say, to coming to Paso for a day trip or kind of just checking in, or you don't have the city that close for distribution or export, or uh, to be able to say attain different supplies or from suppliers and things like that. And so what I'm getting at is that Paso in its history was very much on its own. We were very neighborly. We just helped each other, and we did what we needed to do. And it was always very kind of maverick in nature. Like, if bootstrap means anything, it's like, getting yourself up and picking yourself up by your own bootstraps. That's kind of what Paso's nature has always been. And so doing it our own way in a sense. And because it is a region mostly of growers and of small brands, yeah, if you needed to make wine to sell it on a broad market, well, that can pose a big challenge. But with so many brands here being very, very small in nature and selling direct to consumer, you can kind of do what you want and not really care. A lot of the wines that you might see in national or international distribution, yeah, you're going to see some excellent versions of Cabernet Sauvignon and the Rhone varieties, and then some Zinfandel. You might not see those straight bottlings of Counoise or of even Malbec for that matter. There's a lot of competition out there. But for those that you do see, and we're gaining traction in that. I think we're gaining, especially domestically, people are starting to go, oh, they kind of get us a little bit more now. We've been doing it a little while, and being very unapologetic about not being that one thing, not playing by the wine industry's rules, and I think people are trying to catch on now.
That's yeah. It sounds like you've got a lot of freedom in what you
Yeah.
do. Yeah, and it's been working. So you said your production is quite small, in a lot of wineries. So what would you say is the average wine production scale? I'm sure there are differences in the scale, of course, but what would you
Yes.
say? Yeah.
Well, about 85% of the brands in Paso are at about an 8,000 case and below production. And those are 12 bottle cases. And we know that because we're a membership organization, and wineries report to us their case production, because it's a sliding scale on how you become a member. You pay on the amount of cases you produce. And so we're able to at least attain a figure that is what we think pretty on point for the totality of our region. And that being said, 8,000 case and below, 8,000 cases, you're probably on the verge of going into distribution. You're probably mostly selling to your wine club, and you're probably mostly selling direct to consumer. But we're at that, or those brands at that level though, are they're actively selling, to a very dedicated consumer. They've got marketing behind them. They're a little different than, say, maybe a 500 case or even a 1,200 case brand, who is probably pretty focused with who their consumer is. And so but then again, though, that 8,000 case level, like when you drop down to the next level, which is probably around, say, like that 5,000 case, and then maybe the 2,000 case, all these levels are all places where, as a brand, you need a tasting room, or you need a marketing person, or you need somebody on the road selling for you. And as you scale up, but that's a good gauge as to how small our brands are in our area.
Right, 8,000 cases are quite small if you look at other regions internationally. So
Yeah.
I feel very lucky that we are able to taste some Paso Robles wines in South Korea as well, because it's quite far away. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we get some here. Right, so I think we naturally moved on to our next topic actually. So the market
Okay.
appeal. So you talked about the domestic market being that lifting the Paso Robles reputation. Then,
Mhm.
what kind of what have you seen in the last years in what's been the changes in the international market, particularly in Korea and Japan?
Ooh, okay. Well, this was, our first bit of foray into going into any Asian markets. Actually, that's not true. Some years ago, I was part of the Wine Institute's tour to what they called emerging markets. So it was Singapore, Taipei, and Ho Chi Minh City. And same thing, I was presenting the AVA in a series of kind of presentations and showcasing some wines. I will say back then, though, the wines shown were only those that had large production and that were fairly well established with their international footprint of wines. Um, and so today, I guess what you can say how things have changed is the amount of smaller brands uh, that are now wanting to get into export. I will say, we've had great history as a region with Canada when it comes to export, right? So that's been a bit of a training ground for many brands, including a lot of small brands. But Asian markets are very exciting because there is a large demand there. Also, there's quite a bit of I guess you could say exploration. There isn't necessarily a demand that it has to be French or it has to be Italian, but that that California, and this is probably a testament to California and Wine Institute, but California wines are seen as a great wines to enjoy as well, and also to carry in wine shops or carry in restaurants and the like. And so I think that's probably why we see it as well as a great market to try to tap into a little,
Mhm.
Um, like I said, for us, I mean, this is pretty new. And so history, I, I, I don't know the history for sales, let's just say, but definitely interest. We've got more interest today than we did in past times.
Yeah, I think so. Especially Korea is a barbecue nation. We eat a lot
Yeah.
of barbecue, and it just goes so well with those Paso Robles wines. Last time you were in Korea, we had that Weber event where you brought these Paso Robles recipe and did some barbecue and paired with some wine, and that was just a fantastic way to be introduced as well. But I'm guessing you saw a lot of similarities by trying some Korean barbecues and how it can go
Yeah.
really well with the wine. So could you tell us a bit about your experience?
Yeah, sure. I will say a couple of things, actually, funny enough. So we had I think I had Korean barbecue 3 times, I believe, while I was there. Maybe twice. Is that right? Trying to think. Anyway, um, what was so fun about having now I do wish I had some Pastorals wine at the time because I mean, having something, if it was, whether it be a Zinfandel or maybe a Malbec with something with like some oomph and some zing with acid, would have been so fun to have with some of the food that we ate, because all of the little dipping sauces and some of the spicy elements that came along with it, or even nothing, even just the grilled meat and the flavor. Like one of the evenings, um, it was pork only, and that was, I mean, pork and like Syrah are a match made in heaven. Like it's, essentially bacon. And what's in Syrah is essentially a lot of these bacon fatty flavors and things, and they would just accentuate each other so magnificently. And so that would have been nice and super fun. But I'll tell you what, though, we went out to fried chicken also that one night. That would have been super fun to have like a really racy, like acidic white wine, like something like a Grenache Blanc would have been so good that night. Okay, Korean beer is really, really good too, and it goes well.
Right.
I get it. Um, but from a wine standpoint, though, that whole fried chicken thing that you got going on over there with that crunchy, salty skin type, you know, that bite and that crunch, with something like a Grenache Blanc, Pic Pool Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, any of those acid-driven white wines, could have been just incredible. Yeah. So,
I, I actually before this podcast, I talked to Jason Haas from Tablas Creek, and he was talking about how fried chicken would pair really well with a rosé wine.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I could
is that
totally
something
see
that you
that.
would see as well? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Especially theirs has that element of acid, that leanness, that the Catalan rosé that they create. Yeah, that would be good. I could see that as well. Yeah.
Yes, we eat a lot of fried chickens. So I think, well, I hope that we get a little bit more of white wines from Paso Robles as well in the future. So what would you say is looking ahead? What are your hopes and aspirations for the growth of Paso Robles wines in Asian market, Korea, Japan, I guess Singapore as well, and some other countries?
Mhm.
Are there any specific initiatives or collaborations that you foresee happening?
Not straight away. I don't see any collaborations just yet. I think that they will come. I think that this was a really important mission that we kind of accomplished by going to Japan and South Korea. Um, and that it's going to just open doors, we believe, for us for the future and for our brands. Um, I was pleasantly surprised at the amount of like wine shops and bars in Seoul. And I understand maybe that was specific to kind of that Gangnam neighborhood that we're
Yeah.
or region that we're in. But still, I mean, we even went to at least two different wine bars to check them out. And the fact that there were California wines on the list, the fact that there were some Central Coast wines on the list, the fact that there weren't any Paso wines on the list yet, that would be an
Yet.
aspiration that we know that those owners, those shop owners, and those carrying our wines or carrying wines are now maybe open to Central Coast wines, open to California wines. We think Paso, and hopefully the palate of many Korean people have that interest in that. And we saw it in the trade tasting, but from a consumer standpoint, I think I look to you to say like, yeah, they're ready for it and they want that, they want that style of wine. But I would hope though that after this mission that we when we come knocking or when our brands or when our importers come knocking that there's some doors opening up that we'll hopefully see a rise in the amount of Paso Robles wines on offer there.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I mean, as you know, Napa wines have an incredible success in South Korea, and
Mhm.
now Sonoma as well. And I think the next is, I don't want to say next, but Paso Robles is definitely coming the next buzz, I say. Well, I hope. Right. So, what is then your personal favorite way to enjoy Paso Robles wine?
Oh, wow. Um, you know, I got to experience my favorite way while there. Let's go
Ooh,
back to that Weber event. The Weber event, they had those ribeyes that they were coating and putting that Santa Maria style rub on. That or just salt and pepper, to be honest, on a piece of meat that's cooked perfectly medium rare. With You pick any producer from that day, pouring wines, truly those wines with just sitting at a grill. Like, I mean, this is such a like American cliche, but to be sitting there at a grill, you're making meat for your friends, your family, whatever it is, sipping on a beautiful glass of something red, and that's going to be vibrant and juicy, great acidity, a little bit of boldness to it, but maybe not too much, right? And then maybe picking off a little piece of something that's cooking on that grill just to snack on it while you're finishing things off. That was kind of that event at Weber, because they were cooking right there, and then they were like
Right.
bringing the food out, and it was in little bites, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm grilling this myself. It was a little piece of home, and that would be my favorite.
Oh, my mouth is watering again thinking about that event. I hope that we get to have more people that get to experience that more in Seoul. So we just don't have to drool over this talk now. Right, right. So for the last question, just one liner. If you were to introduce Paso Robles, just in one line, to anyone who's never heard of it, never have tried the wine, what would that be?
Oh, wow, that's tough. What did Jason say? No.
Unfortunately, I didn't ask him
Man.
that.
I think wow, that has never tried a Paso Robles wine. What would I say? I'd say get ready for something really delicious.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah. I like that a lot. All right. Oh, thank you so much for talking to us today. We've learned so much about the history, the region, the climate, how to enjoy it, what it tastes like, all about Paso Robles. I cannot think of any better person to learn about all this than you. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. And I hope that I'll have you again when we have some bit more development in South Korea as well, or when you have something more interesting. I mean, when you have something interesting to tell us, I'm always open.
Absolutely. I am more than happy to come back on with you whenever you will have me. It's been a delight, and so thanks so much for allowing us to be able to talk more about Paso Robles wine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon again.
Okay.
Right.